Hey, gang, here comes your Monday poll, your Cyber Monday poll question. Your Cyber Monday poll question. Actually, perfectly timed for Cyber Monday because it's a financial question. How much does it take for a family of four to live independently in America, free of any government assistance? And I've given you several choices. $50,000, $75,000, $100,000, $125,000, $150,000 or more. The short version as to why I'm asking this question is that the U.S. poverty line for a family of four is $32,150. Notice I don't even have $32,150 as one of my answers because I think that's ridiculous. But $32,150 is the U.S. poverty line, a provocative essay published since we were last together that I'll discuss and which we've included in the Smerconish.com daily newsletter says the real line is 140,000. 140,000, which would mean that a lot of people are living in poverty in the United States. Thank you to my friends at Parks Casino. Fall is a special time in Central PA. Make the trip, get lucky in no time at Parks Casino, Shippensburg, right in Central PA off exit 29 of Route 81, Parks Casino, close to Hagerstown, Maryland, close to Martinsburg, West Virginia, the nearby Pennsylvania towns of Chambersburg, Carlisle, and Greencastle. The fall comedy series every Friday night at 8 p.m. This Friday, comedian Earl David Reed from The Tonight Show headlines. Parks Casino, Shippensburg, 500 state-of-the-art slot machines, 48 live dealer table games featuring blackjack, roulette, plus Bet Parks betting kiosks, and a great daily happy hour at the award-winning Liberty Bar and Grill. Take a drive in Central PA. Enjoy the foliage. It's a nice time of year. Get in on all the action. Parks Casino, Shippensburg, right off Interstate 81, parkscasino.com. You got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Before I address the Monday poll question, let me just run through a number of results since we were last together. I'll go all the way back to last Wednesday. Holy smokes. More than 33,000 voted when I asked, do you agree with Secretary Sean Duffy, Department of Transportation Secretary Duffy, who said that airline passengers ought to dress with respect to promote civility? 55.54% of us, I was in the majority on that, said yes. By the way, I ran through some of the data last Wednesday as we were about to celebrate Thanksgiving, and the data suggests that people's behavior is impacted by their clothing. How you view yourself and how others view you. Makes perfect sense. Up your game when you're traveling. Thursday, Thanksgiving. Are you thankful for being an American? 29,478 voted. 89% in round numbers said, yeah, I'm thankful to be an American. I was heartened to see that. I didn't say proud because I thought if I say proud, it's going to get all political. Well, I'm not proud because of the commander-in-chief, or I am proud because of the commander. No, I just wanted to know, take a step back. Are you thankful for being an American? 90% said that they are. All right. The Friday poll question had a little dip. It had a little dip.
It did have a dip.
Which we're attributing to what? Black Friday or lack of interest?
I don't think it's lack of interest. I think it's lack of knowledge. I think it's I refer to it as a double bubble. I think it's a double bubble. It's a double bubble.
Is that confused with a cuddle bubble?
Cuddle bubble?
From Cozy Earth?
No, a double bubble meaning that it's not just a Northeast bubble or I read the Vanity Fair bubble. It's a bubble because I think it's a media bubble. I think this is an in-depth media people sex scandal. And okay. I think maybe there's some knowledge of the Olivia Nuzzi because of RFK Jr., but I think when you go into Ryan Lizza, everyone's like, who, what, where, why, when, how? So that's what I would say, double bubble.
There were only 9,079 votes. Whose side of the story are you more interested in hearing, Olivia Nuzzi or Ryan Lizza? At least 55.18% had the correct answer in saying Ryan Lizza, because this guy is just like unpeeling an onion.
Yeah.
And every time he does, there's another ripple. Right. We're up to 3 parts already, and I'm eagerly awaiting part 4. But duly noted, you're not as into this as I am. So
As we are,
TC as well. Yes. So there will only be passing reference in the future to this story. Saturday poll result. Well, we rebounded. We rebounded nicely. 42,723 is guaranteed income, a realistic remedy for job loss due to AI. On CNN Saturday, I went through all the recent headlines of job loss and had a recent MIT study. It came out just last Wednesday that said 11.7% of the American workforce already can be replicated or duplicated or replaced. There we go. Better word, by artificial intelligence. This is not in the future. This is here and now. And then I said, kind of reminds me of all those things Andrew Yang said in the 2020 campaign. So he was my guest on CNN, and we talked about universal basic income, or the freedom dividend, as he described it in the campaign. Andrew Yang was clearly ahead of his time in talking about the impact of robotics and artificial intelligence. But in terms of the answer to the question, 73.64% said, no, that's not the answer. To which I say, okay, then what is plan B? The Sunday poll question at Smerconish.com. Are we ever going to get to Monday? Yeah, we'll get there in just a moment. 34,959 voted. Should the U.S. employ lethal force against vessels suspected of drug trafficking? 86.2% said no. That's the Pete Hegseth question. Andrew McCarthy, the conservative lawyer, the writer for National Review, the commentator for Fox News, is going to be on today's radio program talking about Hegseth. He's very condemning, as are many, of Hegseth, saying if it's true, because he denies it and the president is accepting his denial so far, Hegseth is denying that he said kill them all. So that was yesterday's question, to be revisited on radio today. Now, the Monday poll question, the Cyber Monday poll question. How much does it take for a family of four to live independently in America? I ask this because Julie Zasmer-Weil caught my eye in the Washington Post, revealing a lot of interesting data. The median household income, the Post reported, was $83,730 last year. That's not average. That's 50% above, 50% below. The median household income, $83,730. For families with two or more children, the median was $109,300. The U.S. poverty line, the number the Department of Health and Human Services says is necessary to keep a family out of poverty, is $32,150. This was all contained in the Washington Post story. $32,150 is the poverty line. Enter Michael W. Green. Michael W. Green works for Wall Street as a portfolio manager for a $500 million fund and writes on Substack. And he says, you know what the real poverty line is? $140,000. 140. And if for a family of four, you're not making 140, you in this country are living in poverty. And it really touched off an interesting debate. How does he get there? His literal number, I'm rounding, his literal number is 136,509. So how does he get there? Child care, in round numbers, $32,000. Obviously, if you don't have kids, you're not paying child care. But he's thinking 2 kids, 2 parents, $32,000 in annual child care. Housing, $23,000. Food, $14,000. I think that's light. Healthcare, $10,000. I think that's light. Other essentials, $21,000. Taxes, $18,500 for a grand total of $136,509. So it's interesting because he talks in his essay about where does the poverty line come from? I never knew. He said he was floored to hear this. The formula for calculating the American poverty line was developed by Molly Orshansky, an economist at the Social Security Administration in the early 60s. She observed that families spent roughly 1/3 of their income on groceries. Since pricing data was hard to come by for many items, like housing, if you could calculate a minimum adequate food budget at the grocery store, you could multiply by 3 and establish a poverty line. And that's where it came from. And Michael Green said in 1963, that floor, that means of calculation made sense because housing was relatively cheap. A family could rent a decent apartment or buy a home on a single income. Healthcare was provided by employers and cost relatively little. Blue Cross, this is all obviously putting it back in time. averaged $10 a month. Childcare didn't exist in the market because mothers stayed home, families helped, neighbors pitched in. Cars were affordable if prone to breakdowns, with few luxury frills. The neighborhood kids in Votech could fix most problems, and they did. College tuition could be covered with a summer job. Wow, think of that. And retirement meant a pension, not a pile of 401k assets that you had to fund yourself. So Michael Green says that calculation made sense back in the early 60s. It doesn't make any sense now because everything changed between 1963 and 2024. What changed? Housing costs exploded. Healthcare became the largest household expense for many families. Employer coverage shrank. Deductibles grew. Childcare became a market. That market has become ruinously expensive. College went from affordable to crippling. Transportation costs rose as cities sprawled and public transit withered. The labor model shifted. The composition of household spending transformed. Housing now consumes 35 to 45% of our income. If you keep Orshansky's logic, if you maintain her principle that poverty could be defined by the inverse of the food budget share, but the update, the food budget share reflects today's reality, it's no longer a multiplier of 3, it's a multiplier of 16, and on and on and on. And he says, consequently, the real threshold for what it takes in this country to take care of a family of 4 is somewhere between $130,000 and $150,000. Now, if you go into the weeds on this, and I realize I'm a little in the weeds on this, but you start out with the Washington Post overview, and then you read the Michael Green essay. I've had both in the newsletter recently. The most interesting thing for me is that he talks about the valley of death. What is the valley of death? It's like this purgatory where just as you're rising on the economic ladder, you're losing government assistance. And you're actually in a worse position than the people who are earning less than you. Quote, once I established that $136,500 is the real break-even point, says Michael Green, I ran the numbers on what happens to a family climbing the ladder toward that number. Our entire safety net is designed to catch people at the very bottom, but it sets a trap for anyone trying to climb out. As income rises from $40,000 to $100,000, benefits disappear faster than wages increase. I call this the valley of death. Let's look at the transition for a family in New Jersey. The official view from $35,000, that's the official poor. At this income level, the family is struggling. But the state provides a floor. They qualify for Medicaid, free health care. They receive SNAP, food stamps. They receive healthy child care subsidies. Their deficits are real, but they're capped. The cliff at $45,000, the family having gotten a $10,000 raise, good news. Not really. Because now that they're at $45,000, the parents lose Medicaid eligibility. Suddenly, they must pay premiums and deductibles. If they hit $65,000, this is the breaker. The family has worked harder. Now they've increased to $65,000. They're now solidly working class, but at roughly this level, child care subsidies vanish, and they must now pay the full market rate for daycare. So the income has gained $20,000 in this model. The expense increase is $28,000, and the net result is total collapse. Said more simply, when you run the net income numbers, a family earning $100,000 is effectively in a worse monthly financial position than a family earning $40,000. And then there's a whole conversation that he launches. I'm going to get this guy on the program. TC's going to get this guy in the program. The mathematical valley, he says, explains the rage that we see in the American electorate, specifically the animosity of the working poor, the middle class, toward the actual poor and the immigrants. Economists and politicians look at this anger and they call it racism or lack of empathy, but they're missing the mechanism. The mechanism. Altruism is a function of surplus. It's easy to be charitable when you have excess capacity. It's impossible to be charitable when you're fighting for the last bruised banana. The family earning $65,000, the family that just lost their subsidies and is paying $32,000 for daycare and $12,000 for health care, is hyper aware of the family earning $30,000 and getting subsidized in food, rent, childcare, and health care. And therein breeds the animosity. Therein explains the populism. Therein lies the answer as to why Donald Trump ran so well in Rust Belt states and won the election. That's the background on today's poll question. I hope you're as into it as I am. Michael Green concludes that we've created a system where the only way to survive is to become destitute enough to qualify for aid or rich enough to ignore the cost. Love this subject. How much? How much does it take for a family of four to live independently in America? I'm not even putting in the 31,000 figure. I'm giving you a choice of 50 and then $25,000 increases to 150. What does it take not to live extravagantly to survive a family of four in the United States? What's the minimum annual income that a family needs to cover their housing, health care, child care, and other necessities without government assistance? Go vote on the Monday poll question at Smerconish.com. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're listening to the podcast, we thank you. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Listen to all the podcasts associated with this program. But know that you can watch the daily poll question on YouTube. Be a subscriber. Set yourself up for notifications. That's really the way they want to take in the poll question of the day. See you on radio.